Earlier today, I sat down with Erik Hane. Erik is a literary agent. He is the co-founder of Headwater Literary Management. He's the co-host of Print Run Podcast, the best writing and publishing podcast out there, bar none. It covers labor issues. It covers craft in a way that I don't see anyone else doing. He's also one of my best friends. He's just a cool fucking guy. Today we're going to talk about should writers misbehave on social media, and I think actually the answer will surprise you. Thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers for making this possible. You can sign up to my Patreon below, and here we go. I am here with Erik Hane, who is the co-founder of Headwater Literary Management, and he's my agent. He's also a very talented author in his own right, which is part of why I really wanted him to be my agent. I don't know what else to say about you. What else is there?
What else is there? Great question. I don't know. So yeah, it's kind of like you said. I work at Headwater, which is a company I founded in, God, was it 2018? I think it's 2019. And I represent mostly nonfiction books. It's a lot of, it's almost entirely pretty far left folks. It's people who are doing culture critique, some politics writing, some other sorts of arts and politics stuff, all from the left. And I don't know, it certainly makes for an interesting time in the publishing industry, which we are, I would say, ideologically on the outskirts of. But no, we have a good time, and it's being able to kind of carve out that particular little realm has been really fun, and it's definitely something that I am excited to talk about today, and all the different challenges that kind of come with it and stuff. So,
why does Twitter keep banning your clients?
Oh man, right to it.
Yeah.
I think so. That is the crux of it, because it does feel like all the time I am waking up and finding out that someone I work with they've had their account suspended, or they've had a ban. They're on account number 2. Whatever it is, and it's like, it's frustrating because in basically every single situation, like, my clients don't harass people. You know what I mean? Like, they are not out there being trolls or actual, like, bad faith. Like, they're not doing any of the pernicious things we understand that happen on Twitter. But what happens on a platform like that, to me, is that there's sort of this severe preference for, like, decorum that sort of washes out anything what anyone's actually saying. You know what I mean? And so, for instance, if the Nazi is polite, they get to stay on Twitter, where if the person disagreeing with the Nazi is maybe a little bit rude in their speech, that person gets the axe. You know what I mean? And so like, I see that that's the sort of thing that really trips up, I think, a lot of people that I work with, because, well, I don't know. People who watch your channel surely know that, the lefty spaces of the internet, they can be a little bit polemic. They can be, it's spirited conversation. There's, I don't know, people fight, you know what I mean? It's not a particularly nice, saccharine place. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's like people saying nasty things all the time. But there's disagreement. There's often pointed disagreement. And what happens is that these websites and these whatever sort of moderation plan they have in place just picks up on tone and is like, oh, no, you're being nasty. You've got to go. Even when it just has nothing to do with, like, I don't know. It's very silly to me. And it often translates into, like, waking up, and finding out that someone who was just having what I think we would all understand to be like a very standard Twitter exchange based, like, this is not a website full of fun, friendly, like, people yell at each other, and that's just par for the course. But sometimes the site likes to cherry pick who's yelling at who and bans people accordingly, and I find that incredibly frustrating because these platforms and these accounts, I mean, we can joke all we want, but they matter, right? Like, I mean, people use these sites to promote their work, to meet new professional contacts, to do these things. And it's like, when you rip that away from someone, that actually does affect things. And it can be frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think I lost an account once because somebody was like graphically describing sexual assault in my mentions. Yeah. I was like, don't fucking do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, and then you respond to that, and you are the one who gets banned.
Yeah, and I was doing it in much less terms. It was like literally, like, I think the literal thing I said is, don't fucking describe rape in my mentions. And I lost the whole account for that, and I couldn't get it back.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's frustrating. It's like, it's difficult to get that stuff back, like, people tend to find another way onto Twitter. They start another account, and sometimes they're able to kind of regather some followers or the connections they have, but it never fully comes back together, and it's like, I don't know. It's just tough. And I think the reason I care about it at all, because trust me, I would love to be person number one saying online doesn't matter. I mean, I did dispositionally, as much time as I spend on it, I don't really like it. I find it like it's not a natural place for me. I don't really like like interacting that way is not a natural fit for me. And like, but it does matter because, especially to my work, because publishers pay attention to an author's, or especially a prospective author's, social media presence. Like, oh, do they have a lot of followers? Do they have real connections? Do they have these things? And it's like, when that is constantly getting nerfed for no reason, it makes it harder. And it also, like, let me see if I can tease this out a little bit. Like, the people with big followings in a website that is largely driven by conflict, they got those giant followings probably by being pretty strategic in their own conflicts too. I mean, they were fighting. They're just now big enough where they don't have to anymore. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's extremely inconsistent when it comes to like publishing stuff. I get frustrated because it feels like the industry has this attitude or orientation toward Twitter, especially. I mean, that's the site I know. I mean, these other places I can't really speak to as well, but like, it doesn't really reflect what's happening or like how these sites actually work,
Yeah. And they drive like, tens of sales, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So I had a fascinating conversation with a publisher the other day, or I guess now it's been more than the other day, months now, but like, and we were basically sitting around trying to figure out, does Twitter matter whatsoever in terms of book sales? And this person was not convinced. I mean, we were, in the proposal I sent the person for the client I was pitching. It was, oh, they've got this many Twitter followers. Look at all these connections they've got, all these things. And we kind of got down the road, right? They were interested in the book, all these things. And we finally got on the phone and they told me, I just don't know if any of this matters. I don't know if this is an actual way that this book could get sold. But I don't know if, like, and the general theory being proposed was that it was just tens of people talking to each other without actually reaching an actual readership that might be encountering the work new and wanting to actually buy a book based on it. You know what I mean? Like, basically the conversation revolved around the idea, like, is lefty book Twitter entirely insular in a way that it's not actually, are we only talking to our friends as opposed to making, reaching enough people to say, hey, here's where a book buying audience is. And I got to say, I sort of came down, it was a pretty convincing discussion, frankly. I mean, I don't think there's a ton of evidence, at least in the types of books that I work on, that Twitter moves the needle. I mean, obviously there are exceptions when like an author really, really has a massive platform and is able to kind of use it to do certain things. I mean, people like, Shea Serrano, or someone who is really able to kind of marshal the site into orders of books in a way that I think goes underappreciated as extremely rare. You know what I mean? Like, there are not very many people who do that.
Shay can just boost a charity, and 5 minutes later it'll be funded, like a GoFundMe. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, because he's just a monster.
I guess the point is, like, there are not many people like that. And and there are especially not that many people like that over in our corner of the internet, where people are really, lefty Twitter is really interested in ideas and discussion, I think. I mean, maybe they're not, but I mean, depending on the day. But, like, does that mean they're shelling out for the book? I don't know. I mean, it's tricky,
Yeah. Like, the best I can figure is, people are like, oh, you got your article to move. I got that Jesse Single article to really move. And part of it was, it was, something people were really hungry for. That was a big part of it. But also, I asked people to boost that.
Yeah.
I just went to people who will someday call in, I'm sure favors from me to boost that. But that's the sort of thing you have to do. I think people are sort of like, well, I'll just put it out into the ether. You can't do that.
No, the ether doesn't work. I think, like, one thing, thinking about that example specifically, like, obviously the work in the article was extremely substantive and good, and there's plenty to stand on its own. But I also think one reason it sort of took off is that it had a naturally adversarial bent to it in a way that I think really plays online. You know what I mean? Like, you were coming at a dude, and
yes, I was.
It was somebody that a lot of people
want.
Yeah. I mean, it was tapping into some friction, and if the site runs on friction, which I think it does, like, you tapped into a vein that really worked, and people were interested in it, and they shared it. Like, and hopefully along the way, a bunch of people read it and got something actually substantive beyond just a little Twitter fight out of it. You know what I mean? Like, because the piece was great.
Several of the links to that thing exceeded like 1,000 likes, which is unheard of for an article. For articles, you'll get people posting from the New York Times will get like 20 likes.
I mean, my theory is no one's actually reading the article, so it's not even like an original theory. It's just people bouncing headlines around, little links, like, which I don't read everything I post. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it is. I mean, I try to. Most of the things, like, it's I don't know. It's tough. It's like you can't quite tell what is actually happening, and it sort of creates this environment where it's sort of unclear what the goal is of any of this, what we're actually working toward, at least with regard, to, in my capacity of, like, okay, I got to find authors who can, make a publisher think that they are a good financial bet, and it's tough to know how to quite do that. Like, what moves the needle? I can never tell if it's like the right bylines or a number of followers or the sorts of things, they work on. Like, it fluctuates. I mean, it feels like the standard kind of changes every day,
Yeah. I'm also kind of intentionally, like, I haven't toned down how aggressive I am. And it's rough for me because I have the PTSD. And the place I go to isn't flight, it's fight, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there are still some triggers, which I'm not going to share with everybody here. But just occasionally, I literally do get triggered, and I get mad. And I'm much better than I used to be. I'm sure you can attest. But there's also an element of the people I want to work with. There's I want somebody who signs on with me to see that I get into the occasional scrap, because that means that's what they signed up for.
Yeah.
Because that means that if somebody comes and speaks to the manager, I can say to them, okay, somebody spoke to the manager. This is who I've been. This is what I'm like. And it's not so much because I want to misbehave and I want people to accept that I misbehave. It's really more that I can act perfectly and people will speak to the manager. People will invent reasons, to speak to the manager. And I need them, whether it's valid or not, to go, well, it's not my job to be your manager. That needs to be something that they understand going into the conversation, because at the end of the day, there's professional standards, but this is contract work. This is not something where you're paying me as an employee to represent you as a company. I'm a contractor. I'm representing me. Yeah. And I need to be able to, to conduct myself in a way that will sell me. And sometimes that means, or even just defend myself, even just have a spine, because people will walk all over you. And not only that, but there's places like, kiwi farms out there, which are just scary, scary places. And sometimes, you need to ignore them, and sometimes you need to be aggressive. It just depends on what's appropriate.
Yeah. That does sort of speak to what has felt like conventional advice for authors on the internet for a very long time now, which is always be nice, stay positive, just focus on, don't get into politics, don't get into, these personal things, just focus on promoting your work and promoting other people's work and talking about craft and all that stuff. And like, it just doesn't reflect anything that's actually happening. I mean, it's just not totally true. I mean, there is like a sizable part of quote unquote writer Twitter that is like that.
Writer Twitter is very much about decorum.
It feels it's almost like entirely about decorum. Yeah. Like, it's people who it's like strange because they flatten out their personalities to be nothing but like little book aesthetics and hashtags and like very base level craft discussions that aren't meant to be too provocative or anything. Like, just, maybe a, gif or two of a cat or a cup of coffee or whatever the hell, and like, it's, and I blame, like, just to be clear, like, I don't think that's a personal, like, it's just the way, like, there's no way these people are that uninteresting, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like this space that has flattened itself into, like, just nondescript nothingness, and it's like, when a publisher then thinks, okay, this is what the internet is supposed to be, when a writer actually doesn't do that, then it can come off as, oh, person is, we don't know about their social presence, they're wild, they're all these things. And like, it's, I don't know. And it's like weird because at the end of the day, it's always the writer that's going to get thrown under the bus. Like, if a writer misbehaves, quote unquote, misbehaves, right? Like, it's never going to be, like, it's very easy for a publisher to kind of cut and run. And that's been a huge movement in, like, amongst some of my colleagues, where it's like, what are we doing with these morality clauses? Like, how do we, like, I've had that discussion at contract stage before at this point, where I'm like, look, this client of mine tends to draw negative attention on the internet simply by existing as they are. If someone does something like that, we want assurances that you aren't going to just say, oop, conflict, not doing the book anymore, you know what I mean? Which used to be the standard. And we've moved past, I mean, I do think, like, optimistically, at least the presses and the editors that I work with, like, people are a little bit more, like, social media literate to the point where, but I don't know, I mean, I've worked closely with people who just don't see it that way, and it can be tricky. And, like, again, nearly, not all, but a very large proportion of my clients are, rigorous writers. They're not just like Twitter creatures, but like they exist in an online space where that is not the way people behave, and that is not the standard of discussion, and they didn't get to where they were getting attention from agents by being perfectly pleasant all the time. You know what I mean? That's the part that goes under discussed, is like getting a little bit spicy on the internet is often how people like draw attention to their work, and that's fine to me. I mean, it's, you know, it's just weird. I guess like I just wish that like major publishing could like update its like view of how writers are supposed to be, and like what even Twitter is supposed to be, or how online works, you know. And it's like happening in spots, and other spots it isn't. I don't know.
There's like there are a few trends on writer Twitter. Like, first of all, I have noticed I don't put my agent in my bio, not because I'm not, you know, thrilled about having an agent. People think you're my boss.
Isn't that weird?
People think
it's very
that
strange.
It's your job. Like, yeah, like the moment I put you in my Twitter bio, I would say maybe once a month, maybe more often, people contact you.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of that. I mean, it's died down now, probably because you just took it out. But like,
yeah,
there was a lot, and you're not the only client of mine where that happens. Like, it's people see that tag, and the first thing is, oh man, here's someone I can tell on. And it's just the most like sucker shit. Like, I just hate it so much. It just makes me like, at base level, anyone who does that for nearly any reason, I just makes me frustrated. I think it's poor behavior to snitch tag and do things. And like, it's not even that. I'm getting like thorough emails from people. You know what I mean? It's like, what? Leave me alone, dude.
And it's often really disingenuous. It's not, I don't like your client. It's, here is why, you know, representing them constitutes a serious war crime.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's never just a little conflict like that. It's always, and that feels like
I don't know if you know how your client speaks to people online. Like,
yeah, this is, and like my policy at this point is just to just delete. Like, I don't care. It's not that I don't care. It's that, because again, I would prefer that my clients aren't like on the internet like using slurs and things. You know what I mean? Like, there are things that would make me say, like, want to have a conversation with someone. And there are other internet things that are less about morality that I have talked to clients about doing and not doing before. You know, I have had like book publishers email and say, hey, I saw your client tweeted this while they were on submission. Does this mean that they are like, all of which is to say, it's not like the content was particularly bad or good. It was just like, there are times
you do have to. There are norms. Like, you have to keep. If you're on, like, when you're on submission, you just need to you need to go, I'm on submission, and then you just shut up.
And just at least not discuss that particular aspect. Like, this is the thing, right? And this is why I do think the specificity is really important, and I try to do that when clients of mine go on submission. It's like, look, you know, I don't care about whatever thing, you know, like, you fight with whoever you want. Just don't mention that your book is in X, Y, and Z places and being reviewed by whoever. And it's like, I'll share information with writers if they really want it. But like, sometimes it's, oh, which editors am I on submission with? And I'm like, I am not telling you that, because the first thing you're going to go do is follow them. And then it's going to be this whole, I don't know. It's just like, there are little dynamics where you just have to manage it a little bit, you know, and that has nothing to do with questions of appropriate behavior, but rather just like strategic professional thinking, you know. But that's separate from like what you're describing, which is, I don't know, people trying to pretend that representing someone who got in a fight on the internet is somehow like a breach of ethics. That mean I'm not equipped to be an agent, you know what I mean? I get told all the time that I shouldn't be a literary agent because of, oh, well, you know, these clients of yours, they're, you know, doing whatever. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you, sir. Like, I'm just gonna keep, like, I don't mind. I like representing people who have real personalities, and I don't mind, like, that stuff. I'm not a particularly, like, I don't love conflict either, but, like, that doesn't
No,
mean
you're
I
not.
don't,
Your version of
like,
getting into a fight on the internet is replying, "I don't think that's
yeah,
true."
that's my new move. I've taken all my Scandinavian repression and just put it into saying, "Are you sure about that?" Yeah, it's that's kind of how it goes at this point. No, but I mean, like, sometimes you see, like, particularly from, like, an older generation of publishing person who is very used to having their advice received uncritically, and they'll say, "Oh, editors and agents, they notice when an author is being nasty on the internet." And I, like, whenever that happens, the first thing I do with myself is I just, like, take a sample of, like, 6 or 7 client, like, Twitters, and I just, like, go to their page, and I bet at any given moment at least 2/3 of them are fighting with somebody. Like, everyone is, like, I just don't know how to describe it other than that. Everyone is yelling at someone, often at each other. That's the best part. It's like, I have a
Yeah.
list that is not totally, like, we are not all best friends, you know what I mean? And that's fine. That doesn't matter. That's the point. It's like, not everything has to be a sunshine and rainbow, like, everyone get along all the time. Like, we can just do our work, you know what I mean? And part of the work is just, like, voicing opinions, and, like, it's,
Ken,
I don't know.
what is a communist if not somebody who hates other communists?
Right. No, that's what I mean. Like, like, it's, I've had situations before where I've been, like, considering signing someone, and maybe I'll know that they've had a past work history with someone I currently represent or something, and I'll go to them and I'll say, "Well, hey, what do you think of this person?" And they'll say, like, I'll usually get some version of, like, "Total crank, don't like them, you should sign them, they're good." You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, and I take that seriously, where it's like, we don't all have, like, people can disagree and still, and this is what this is, not to get all high-minded about, like, communism, but, like, we can look out for each other and we can want good things for each other. Like, I don't have to like all my comrades, you know what I mean? Like, in fact, I don't. I can, like, but that doesn't mean I don't want good things for you, and I'm not willing to, like, I don't know. That just feels like a healthier and more honest way of approaching this stuff, and it just seems much, like, like, we saw it the other day, right? There was this blow up about just this silly, unserious attempt at a literary agency that had all this silly stuff in their copy, and they came under some heat, and people started replying to them and doing this stuff. And the first thing the person tried to do, and she was in charge of this operation, they tried to weaponize exactly this, right? They were like, "Well, you'll never get a book deal because you're being nasty on the internet." They were just firing that off at everyone, and we could all see. I mean, it felt particularly impotent and stupid when they were saying it, but, like, that so often that reflex has nothing. It's just like a mode of disciplining people. It's not like you're not trying to actually
Help
accomplish
people's
something.
career here.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It seems
I will
crazy.
say that I will say that some of the worst harassment I got ever on any website was when I had author in my handle, and people went every time for that, every time, and actually, like, I got into, like, a minor scuffle with somebody over, like, Amazon is exploitative, and it does things like set the price of a book at $0. It'll say $0 if you join Kindle Unlimited, which I'm like, you're telling people over and over again a book is worth $0. That's and somebody took big issue with that and said that they were, an author, and they disagreed. And I'm like, you're a Kindle Unlimited author. How much are you making?
Yeah.
Like, are you, are you making like $300 a year? This is not like, you're not making money. You're not really quite a part of the industry yet. With respect, maybe this is a discussion for people who are.
Right.
Like, who are seeing their, wages go down. And I got people who were not authors themselves, who were, readers, who took real offense to that.
Yeah.
And they ended up like posting video of the inside of where I lived.
That's
Like
insane.
just doxing me fully.
Over
At one
what
point
too?
they got,
Like over a fight about Amazon? Like
yeah. And they
yeah.
they started threatening you, and that really set me off in terms of like, go for me, don't go for the people I'm employed, who I'm employed.
Yeah.
Like, so it was real bad. And I feel like for some reason I have really avoided, I'll put it in my bio, but I won't put it in my handle. I won't put it somewhere else that I'm an author specifically. I could say writer, but author. For some reason, people are like, you have an additional thing where now I'm your boss. Now everybody's your boss, and you're a bad employee.
That's the funniest. That is such a good observation, because I do think that that's, for some reason, the idea of a writer, it brings it out of people. Like, the most beaten on person online is the writer, right? Like, and
Yeah, as a professional,
it's like
absolutely, yeah.
Like, if they can find it, like, for whatever reason, people just naturally, like, that is just a point of attack for people. They see it as something that they can pick at, and because it sort of, I think the reason is probably because it, like, being a writer suggests, like, opening yourself up in some way, like, through your opinions or through your perspective, or, like, maybe you have a job through your, like, whatever it is. People are like, oh, there's the point of vulnerability. That's where we can get at something that matters to them and scare them. And it's just, like, I don't know. It's just very...
There's also like a relationship thing where it's like, aren't you supposed to be giving me what I want? Aren't you a short order cook? Aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but like the idea that none of us are making any money, which is a good bet.
Yeah.
There's just several axes along which people just go for the neck. Also, they know that if they find a reason that you've misbehaved, there's a pretty good chance that your publisher or whoever else isn't going to stand behind you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's why they see it as the vulnerability, right? Is because there's plenty of precedent of writers getting hung out to dry. And it's, I don't know, it just produces a worse culture, Like, it makes for less interesting work, less interesting publishing, because it's never, the thing about it too is it's like, it's extremely one-sided ideologically, I feel. Like, there are not very many instances of a bunch of lefties getting mad at a right-wing author and that right-wing author losing an opportunity. There are a few.
There are instances of lefties, and I think often they're pretty reactionary lefties going for a left-wing author.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. Like,
yeah, that also happens.
And I think it's like, because left-wing people attacking a conservative writer just proves the point, so to speak, because, like, these people's fundamental belief is that the left is extremely censorious and they're the mob and they're all these things. And so, like, anytime the left gets mad at somebody, oh, there they go, here comes cancel culture. We've got to do the brave, transgressive thing and keep publishing this dipshit. Like, it's, I don't know, it's very strange.
One thing I've been worried about a little bit more, because I've seen it in a couple places. Like, I recently looked into a book launch, and I'm not going to be real specific about this because I don't know for sure what happened, but what I gather happened. There's this manual that what was I saying? People on the far right could use, so they updated the language to make it clear that they didn't want Nazis buying or using this thing.
Yeah.
But there was a gap there between the time when between when they could update it, and in the meantime, that was just months lost, to the discourse. And the thing is, people in this culture knew that it's like that these are sort of works in progress that get updates. And it's not that those critiques shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
It's that there's no counter to it. There's nothing you can do or say to push back and say, to a certain extent, people make money off of having these takes. People benefit, people raise their own profile off of these conflicts. And it's not that it's not a sincere conflict. It's that
there is an opportunism to it, though.
Yes, there is an opportunism to it. And you're still trying to put out something that you believe in, that it is sometimes a work in progress, that is not all things. Like, that's another thing that's a very common critique that you get. It's like, well, this is another book that is about a very specific thing. And sometimes it's not even like it'll be like, well, this is by an LGBTQ author, but it's not by a working class one. And it's like, well,
yeah.
What do you want?
Not every book is everything. You know what I mean? Like, that's why there's more than one book.
There's more than one book that you can read and buy.
And it's just like, yeah, not every. I do feel like there is like a certain sense where like suddenly every project has to sit at the exact right. Like, it has to be the most revolutionary communist thing you've ever read, or we're throwing it in the trash. And it's like, that's not helpful or useful or reflective of actual people's thinking, like, at all, I mean, we don't need, it's like, I mean, you already said it, it's like, we don't need every book to be every single thing. And I do think there's like this trend in reading, and it feels like it's especially true in like, YA and genre stuff, where like every single book now gets, heavily scrutinized even in advance for, all the possible ways that, different aspects get, portrayed, or different, experiences get, and the author oftentimes has to like do a bunch of justifying for why, certain things are appearing in their book, whether it's authentic or true to life or what. And it's just like, I just find it a little bit misguided, I mean, I think like not every book, like, and like, I do want to draw a distinction. It's like, when there are genuinely, harmful or offensive things in a work, like, yeah, we should talk about that, and we should but we should talk about that and figure out why that is, and like have a real, and we should pay attention to who's talking about it too, you know what I mean? Because like sometimes it seems like, I don't know, it seems like sometimes like the people who get in this rush to make everything as perfectly emblematically progressive as possible, the authors who get their stuff canceled the most are the marginalized ones. You know what I mean? It's the ones who aren't bulletproof in this ecosystem. It's like, that's who's getting their stuff yanked. Like, that's who has to, it's like, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it just feels like
there's more scrutiny. Like, if it's just another white guy book, fine. Everybody expects just another white guy book. They roll their eyes. The person gets interviewed about the book. They get prizes for the book, and that's it. But if you're trans, if you're not white, if you're any number of things,
if you're a queer person of color, your book is going to be read with a microscope.
microscope, and you're going to be asked about being a queer person of color. You're not going to be asked about the book, and it's like, well, are you worthy of being the one person who gets this book? Because nobody else is going to get it, so you better be perfect.
I feel like that is where it comes from, right? Is like the problem is that so few books like that get published that the ones that do have to be these perfect banner, and so the solution obviously is
that's a standard that cannot exist. That is a test that cannot be passed.
Right. No, I mean, so the answer has to be to do a better job of, publishing a more diverse array of people and like actually supporting them, and allowing for, imperfections and like progress in thought as opposed to a perfectly sanded down progressive version that pleases a certain corner of the internet. Like, I don't know. There's a million things, that go into why publishing looks the way it does, but all of this stuff is like downstream of that, right? Where you get this, I don't want to call it like puritanical, but sometimes it kind of feels that way because it's such a pressurized environment that like every book that isn't, like you say, like people, paradoxically, the books by the, the same profile of white, male writer, people just kind of hand wave at them at this point because they don't expect it to be anything. It's like, I don't know. It's just interesting how we hold different parties to different standards like this in a way that feels actually opposite of what our overall goals are,
Yeah. So, kind of go back to something you said way back about like, what is it called? Morality clauses.
Yeah.
To go back to morality clauses. On the very first time I signed with you, before you started your own agency, there was a morality clause in that contract. There was something like a morality clause. And it was an interesting morality clause. I think I actually have it here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember the exact wording.
It was less bad than I remember it. I remember kind of panicking. It reads, and remember, a contract is, we will do this, you will do this. Here's the clause. It is also understood that the author will act in a professional manner online and in person, avoiding abuse, threatening, or coercive treatment of another person, no bullying, no shaming, no unsubstantiated rumors or gossip, in keeping with the philosophy and reputation of this agency and all persons working for this agency. And I had like a little panic when I read that.
Yeah.
And people are going to think that's because I want to be like a bully. And it wasn't that. It really wasn't. I mean, partially it is because I have a presence online and I'm kind of like, but the thing that got me, I was like, there's something up with this. There's something really up with this. And the thing I think that got me was, I think the thing I said to you, this is not in the format of a clause, of a contract clause, because a contract clause is always, you will do this and I will do this. This is, you will do this.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very one-sided and it's...
Yeah. And there is no... I think the thing that really got me was there's no statement of, and we will do this.
Yeah.
And there's something we will give you in terms of support, in terms of how we'll treat you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's hard. I mean, when, like, morality clause stuff, the thing that jumps out to me with something like that is there's just no definitions for any of the terms that appear there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, it's all of that stuff is in the eye of the beholder, and if you're just popping in, you can say, oh, any of that is bullying when taken out of context, or anything can be
Absolutely.
Shaming. Like, what does shaming mean? You know what I mean?
What does shaming?
That could be anything if you want it to be. Like, if you're looking for a reason to invoke this on someone, like, these things could mean anything, and that's a really frustrating environment. And it also, like you're saying, it doesn't allow for, like, there's no commitment to like, and if you are facing, abuse online, we will stand by you or something like that, like it's just not really a two-way street. It's just like, or like the values of this, the values of this agency. I work for, I don't know what the values of the agency are. Like which is not to say the agency didn't have any, but it's not like we had like a working set of definitions to go, like, it's just all so murky, you know what I mean? Like it just doesn't, and what ends up happening is when you don't have firm, like the reason morality clauses suck, at least one of the reasons, is like, it's just people can interpret them however they want. And
yeah,
you can use it to justify whatever you were wanting to do anyway, and I don't know. It's just tough.
Yeah.
Like, needless to say, we don't have something like that in the Headwater agreement. And because all my authors would fail it, by the way. That's the thing. Like, I don't have a client on my list who would meet that. Like, I'm just like, again, like I'm just thinking aloud. Like, I'm sure I could go online right now and find posts from basically anyone who I work with
just
who's doing something that I could call shaming. Like if everyone is like bullying Eli Lake or something, like, is that shaming? Are we like, I don't know, it's just silly.
How dare you shame Matt Walsh?
That's what I mean. Like, exactly. Like, you made Matt Walsh feel bad. And so, yeah.
Good.
That's what I mean. Like, there has to be, that's the other part of the morality clause, right? Is there's no, it's like ideology and context neutral. Like, it doesn't, like, I can remember a situation once where at that agency, it involved you, like, you had, I don't remember why or what, but like people were mad at you on the internet.
I think this would be the furries who were mad I said all cops are bastards, possibly.
So whatever it was, but you were, going at it with some folks.
Yes.
In the way that your fans on this channel will surely be familiar with.
I'm very nice on this channel.
You are very nice on this channel. But I remember having a conversation, about internet behavior internally, and someone made the recommendation, well, you should tell MK to maybe log off for a little bit and just like, step away from the trolls and all these, don't feed the trolls, right? The classic thing that people say. Like, and the way I sort of framed it in response was that everyone who is fighting with her right now, all these people we all agree are various odious figures, probably Nazi adjacent, whoever, all of them want her to log off. The whole point of all this is to get her off the platform.
Yep.
Why is our strategy to give them everything they want? You know what I mean? Like, and there wasn't really an answer to that. And like, there's never an answer to that, because the only way publishing has ever thought about the internet is that as soon as conflict arises of any kind, any party we are associated with needs to retreat immediately. And I just don't think that's reflective of, it's not reflective of the Twitter I know. And I'm like I don't really argue on the internet. I'm not someone who, but I still see that, I mean, I probably don't fit, the morality clause you just described. And I'm like the nicest, sweetest man who's ever been on the internet, I mean, it's crazy.
Your Twitter's good boy.
No, I just think like it's just tough. Like and it's just like in terms of like power dynamics, like this stuff never benefits the person who needs the protection. You know what I mean? It's all about like enforcing a certain, I don't know, and it's the sort of thing that eventually shuts out, people who face the brunt of the abuse anyway. Because it's, I don't know, it's just not reflective of the actual environment. Even when it's meant to like one thing I will say, like, I think that clause is wrong. I had several disagreements with, things that happened at that agency, but fundamentally, do I think like these were malicious people who had it out for their own authors? No, I don't. I think they just didn't quite understand how this stuff worked. It's at least.
I will. Did you see the like, there are two sides to every story, but did you see what happened with a particular author, their account of their experience around that time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that is a very good counterpoint. And
yeah, and not that I don't necessarily think there was. It's weird saying there was no malice, but I will say it's interesting, and maybe I'll say in a minute what happened. But it's interesting how far no malice can go.
Yeah, like it's. I mean, it turns into that. Like,
yeah.
I think it's tough to describe. It's like what happens is someone's entirely unfamiliar with a certain dynamic or situation or whatever, and rather than trying to listen or understand and orient themselves towards supporting the person, they try to just do what they know, which is make the thing go away or whatever. And it's just like incompetence to the point of no distinction between actively doing someone harm. It's not good, and it's why we had to go.
Yeah.
But
do you mind if I recount that story a little bit for the audience? It's
sure.
I'll take you off screen, and you have nothing to do with recounting that story. It's on me. Sure. So there was an author. So the head of your former agency got some flack because she called the cops on Black Lives Matter protesters. And that got a little backlash. And rather than saying, I'm sorry, there was sort of a very half-hearted thing. People started saying, well, she's done so much for our community. What?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should give her a pass. Maybe we should give her a little grace. And then the minority community went, This was what it was like working there.
Yeah.
Like, I think Foz Meadows, and I'll link that account down below, said that they had a situation where they made a comment about how they'd gotten some weird notes on Sub, which they thought that their agent had passed on to the editor, but that had not happened.
Mm.
And suddenly they were being told that everybody was appalled at their behavior, that they might lose their contract, that they might get fired for it, that they needed to make an immediate apology, delete everything. And the conversation was an hour-long screaming match. And not both ways, just the head of the agency screaming at this person.
Yeah.
And that person eventually, this was a major part of them deciding to just quit being repped without anything lined up, which is, a major blow to their career.
Yeah.
And then there were several other instances of an author asking for an update, and then the head of your agency stepping in and saying, you get twice a year updates. Don't bother your, like that sort of thing, where it's just, there's just, I just think it's very interesting that person put a don't bully clause in there, because there really wasn't an expectation that this.
You can see how one-sided this stuff is, right? Like,
yes,
the behavior, the code of conduct is not universal. It's meant just for. I mean, you can see the inequity of it already, and we see this across any number of other things where, like, people with power don't follow the rules, and it's like when people say the law is not real or something. You know what I mean? It's like it's just applied unequally, you know, and it's, I don't know, it just feels like
I would even say that the whole point of it is to establish that uneven power dynamic. Like it's not, it's you're supposed to have this deference, this decorum, this, and it's like, aren't we peers? Aren't we working together? Like, if anything,
it's
you
a partnership
work
until
for
someone
me
has a problem,
a little
right?
bit?
And it's
and I think it's good to remember that you do work for me because it means I have responsibilities to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think like this is where we get into what I find to be a very strange deference for literary agents on the internet.
Which some of them want.
Which, it's a lot of them want, I would say. I mean, there is like, there's this thing that happens when everyone is an aspiring writer and no one can get a book deal, that agents sort of become this like mystical figure where it's like, oh, if I can just impress this person, then I can get through what feels like an otherwise impossible, set of hoops. And I do think that, a lot of, people in that position have sort of leaned into being, a figure that every writer wants to talk to, that, they like having the big followings of writers that hang on their words and their advice and their threads and their, all this kind of stuff. And it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's all, like, I don't know if it's entirely, like, pernicious, but it is, I think, really skewed in a way that's, like, because you're right, like, this is fundamentally a process of a writer hiring someone to represent them, you know what I mean? And, like, yeah, I mean, 99% of the people who reach out to me, I do not end up representing. I mean, that is true. It's not as though, but it's still, at the end of the day, the dynamic is still where, like, the author is the one paying me, you know what I mean? They're the ones who are paying, me to do a job as opposed to the other way around. And it's, I don't know, I get sort of fed up with it because I think that it doesn't really line up with anything that's good for an actual healthy culture. And it's like, this is again like why there is I don't know what the respectful word for like psychotic is, like attention to querying and submission and like tips and tricks to making sure your pitch letter is exactly right. And it's because everyone, thinks they're one weird trick away from solving what is fundamentally just a giant numbers game, and what happens is like people exploit that, right? Like they make their, whole conferences about publishing advice, and it's like, I don't know, I mean, not to like plug my stuff right now, but like we've tried on, I do this show called Print Run and we do query advice. And we try to come by it honestly, where it's like, look, instead of going to the giant conference or whatever, that's going to tell you the same things that you've already heard a million times, we will tell you, something specific about it, and we will do it, for $3. And in fact, if you can't afford the $3, we'll give it to you for free. And it just feels like should be like the actual rate for this kind of stuff, not these giant fancy packages and class. There's like a whole like publishing industry for writers, cottage industry.
Yes.
That pops up that I really, really dislike. And I am, and just to be transparent, like I am someone who, like we offer stuff for writers, but like it's not. There's a way where you're taking people for a ride based on a false promise and a whole lot of cash. And there's a way where you can just say, here's the answer you're looking for. Please do not invest any more of your resources into searching for a different answer. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, there is need for good information and good advice, but it's like, man, I wish people would quit paying to go to conferences where they learn how to write a query letter, and or like how to impress an agent, or like how to do these different things. It's like, it's not, I don't know how to I don't want to call it a scam because it probably doesn't fit the definition, but like it feels very like you're taking something. You're
teaching you what you need, really.
No, you're not. One, you're not teaching anyone what they need, and two, you're just taking like an insecurity or a fear, right? I'll never be published. There's too many people. Why would anyone want my book? You know, all the weird things that writers feel, you know, in terms of insecurity, and saying I can solve that problem for you for, you know, however much money. And I just think there's so much of that. And it sort of has created this environment where anytime a literary agent says something on the internet, people like, there's just disproportionate interest in it, I think, you know, and like, which is why most of my feed at this point has nothing to do with books, which like I sort of get a lot of comments on, you know, like people are like, well, why are you talking about this? Aren't you an agent? It's like, well, yeah, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to tweet my little tips for sending me an email?
10 queries?
Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested. And you shouldn't be interested either. Like, you should, you know, I don't know. It's just, I think that, but like, the reason to me, like, this relates to what we're talking about with regard to morality clauses and stuff is like, this is how that power dynamic starts to warp. And people view, like, it gives, I think, you know, certain actors the leeway they need to, you know, create clauses in their agreements that say you have to act a certain way or, you know, do certain things. And I don't know, it's just, it seems very misguided to me. And I do think, like, optimistically, I do think more and more people, especially in the younger crowd, and I'm never one who thinks like the new generation is going to solve everything, but I just anecdotally, I do think that there are people, you know, our age and younger in the field who kind of see this and are working toward, you know, better standards and, you know, boilerplates and things like that, that feel a little, I don't know. I think the trend is in the right direction, but
yeah,
there's still a long way to go.
Like it was really rough for me querying because, you know, I attribute maybe too much to being autistic, but there's all these rules and stuff. The rules you have to learn. It's hard, but there is also an element of it actually made it really difficult when I was like, I want to query this guy. I think he'd be a good fit, and then, oh shit, I think I like him.
Yeah,
it was actually harder, much harder.
It becomes like personal. I mean, like,
yeah. Like,
I get that sort of response a lot. Like, I have gotten messages before from people who have sent me a query who maybe I know otherwise on the internet. And maybe usually what ends up happening is I end up rejecting that query at some point, which, believe it or not, does hurt. Like, I hate rejecting people that I have an amicable online back and forth with, and it happens a lot. And it bums me out because I probably genuinely enjoy, like, you know, you want people to succeed even when you're not the one who can help them do that in that situation, right? But like, something that happens a lot is I get messages after that express a ton of relief. You know, they say, "Oh, thank goodness, now we can just talk," or "Now we can," and it always catches me off guard because I guess I'm the one in the driver's seat of these interactions. You know, like, I'm the one reviewing the query, but like, it's very clear that this puts an enormous, and I've queried my own novel a little bit, not enough to feel these feelings yet, but like, it's clear that this is like a very psychologically difficult process for writers in ways that I think agents don't necessarily account for all the time. And it's, I don't know, it's difficult. And we try in our work to be as, you know, just like transparent about how this stuff works and what people are doing and how, I don't know, it's just drops in a bucket, but like, it's, I can even think of like an instance where we met, a writer and a listener of our show in person once, and they hadn't queried either of us before, but they were querying. And we got to the end of this, event they were hosting, and we didn't end up doing anything afterward, which I didn't think twice about when it happened. I got a message the next day that was basically like, I'm so sorry, I didn't invite you guys to like, a drink after or something. I didn't want you to think I was trying to ingratiate myself to you. Like, and I would have never, like, it were things that I would have never, ever thought of. It's just so clear to me that this stuff weighs on people. And this power dynamic is just downhill on folks who are trying to like figure this stuff out. And it like makes me sad because it does like warp a lot of like, I don't want to call them friendships because it's not like, it's just like acquaintanceships, you know what I mean? People who whatever you call the person you reply to periodically and have a nice little banter with a few times a week, you know what I mean? Like those sorts of relationships. Like,
I would say you and I are probably good friends. Like we're
yeah, you and I are.
I would say yeah. But there was definitely an element of almost like minor celebrity is what it's sort of like interacting with, which is odd.
Which is insane. It's insane. I mean,
you had 500 followers on Twitter.
So that, like, there's no reason for that. Like,
and it was, but there was this thing I had to wade through where the way it was going on in my head was I would be so lucky to work with this person. And then when I was working with you, it was like, I am so fucking lucky. And at no point did I go until much later, he would be fucking lucky to work with me.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what writers need to get.
That was the tone it sort of set. And not that you tried that. Like, if anything, you're like the guy who hates that shit.
Yeah. No, but I do think that sort of pops up, and you make a good point, not necessarily about, like, related to, it feels like anytime a new agent pops up, no matter how inexperienced, no matter where they work, no matter what the deal is, suddenly they're so sought after, and it's like, they sold a book? Do they know what they're doing? Is there any actual reason you believe that they have the ability to get you what you want, or is it just nice to say you're in touch with an agent? You know what I mean? Because this is a newsflash, there are a lot of bad literary agents.
Yeah.
Like, I try every single day. I wake up every single day trying not to be a bad literary agent, and it still worries me sometimes. And I consistently sell the books that I pitch. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And
when I was querying you, I'm not sure you'd sold more than a couple books.
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
I was like mostly excited because you could write your ass off. Like, that was what was making me go like this. Like, that's what made me want to bet on you, which is a valid reason, I think, but it didn't mean you could sell anything.
No, and I'm certainly not advocating for people to not look at newer or inexperienced agents, because a lot of them can do a really good job, and they can be in good situations where they have the mentorship they need. Like, everyone has a first sale, you know what I mean? Like, it's not as though, like, young people are, like, it certainly, all the time it happens, but, like, you do have to be a little bit critical in what you're looking at. And it just feels, I don't know, sometimes I see threads and things in publishing Twitter where it's like, oh, this person is just, dropping some industry truth bombs. And it's like, okay, well, I've never heard of this person. I don't know. I am not seeing any sales from this person. I don't know from what perspective they're actually speaking from. Like, and the reason that happens too is because there's these incentives to, like, immediately make yourself into an authority figure if you're an agent, and it's just so silly. Like, And I think there's like one reason I think it has sort of naturally inverted, at least for me, in a way that I think I am somehow lucky for, is like most of the, and I don't think this is true of most agents who are like signing first time book authors, especially in fiction, where maybe they don't have a lot of followers, maybe they don't have like, you know, a lot of debut fiction writers don't really have platforms, right? Like they're starting out, you know, they have a good book, but it's not as though they've done a ton of work that has made them known yet. Whereas in my neck of the woods and nonfiction journalistic stuff, a lot of the writers I sign who have never written a book before are people with 100,000 followers and a very well-established media career. It's a lot tougher to pretend to be an authority figure to that person than it is to a debut fiction. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't go and tell any number. Like, it would be, I'm just laughing at even at the idea that I would like tell most of my list how to behave on the internet. Like, they're big, like they're bigger names than, they're way bigger names than me. All of them are. You are. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you people are. I mean, but like
I'm not bigger than the Sonic Teeth guy.
And who could be? But like, it's just like, I think it's a different environment that has benefited me, where that dynamic, where the idea that I'm working for someone as opposed to the other way around feels extremely clear at all times, because I work with writers who would very feasibly go find someone else, you know, like, and it's like, I better do a good job. I need to, every single day, I need to be proving why go with me, you know, and it's, I mean, it's, you know, it's certainly uncomfortable at times in the way that, like, trying to hold yourself to a certain standard, you know, to make sure you're doing your job is uncomfortable, but like, I don't know. It's just tricky. It's so sometimes when, you know, it just feels like a lot of what we're talking about disproportionately affects like writers who, you know, don't have a byline yet, who don't, you know, who've worked entirely, who maybe are extremely skilled and experienced at their craft, but they've been off writing a novel for several years instead of getting articles out there, starting a, you know, some sort of platform where they're getting their takes, you know what I mean? Like the things that make people known, you know, and it's easier to boss those people around if you're so inclined, and you shouldn't be inclined, but some people seem to be. And I don't know.
I think that might be all I have, unless you have anything you want to say to the internet, to YouTube. To YouTube.com about agents and how authors ought to behave. Well, I guess, how should authors behave? How should we behave? Now that we've talked about it, like, just one more thing. How should we behave?
Just drop the hammer on all of you, huh? Let's see. I mean, I would just say, like, the one thing I would say about author behavior is, like, do it in good faith. You know, like, you can disagree and fight with people on the internet if you're, you know, if you're doing it from a perspective you actually hold, and you're doing it in a way that is designed to, like, you know, maybe you actually are trying to have a real disagreement or a discussion that, like, changes someone's mind, or, you know, whatever, or you're, like, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's none of that. Sometimes you just got to, like, punch up a little bit, you know, like when I, you know, yell at various, you know, right-wing figures on the internet, I'm not engaging in good faith dialogue. I understand that. I'm just yelling at them, you know, but, like, I would just say, like, by and large, especially when speaking to your peers and stuff, if that's what we're talking about, like, do it from a position of, like, optimism about, like, the interaction, you know, and try to at least, like, represent yourself authentically. And that can be angry. It can be all these different rough around the edges things, but, like, sometimes you can just tell when stuff is, like, manufactured outrage that is designed to try to boost someone's profile, you know? And that I find grating and frustrating. And I would say that there's not really, I don't know what that is, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems kind of pointless to me. And, but like, there's plenty of room for healthy and frankly, even disrespectful disagreement. But you got to mean it, you know what I mean? And you got to do it in a way that doesn't like, you know, don't start tagging in employers. Don't start don't lead, you know, sometimes you see people with big followings, like doing things that are very much designed to like flood someone's mentions with a bunch of repliers and stuff. And it's like, you can tell when it's like, you know it when you see it, you know what I mean? Like if you're being an asshole on the internet, you know it, everyone can tell, don't do it, you know? And that's different than...
even if you get your pile on, people take notes. They really do.
They do. No, I mean, I don't have a ton of like firm rules about, oh, who do I want to work with, but like, I don't like people. That's the wrong way to phrase it. I don't necessarily want to represent, right? Like, I like plenty of people who do these things. They're just not going to work with me. But I don't want to really work with writers who seem to drive their entire, you know, brand and animus out of like just picking useless fights that everyone already knows are like, that's not helping. It's not interesting. And like I said at the beginning, like having talked to some different people who really think about this stuff from the publisher angle, we're not even convinced it works. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure that it's actually even moving units. So, I don't know.
I guess I have one more thing. Like, so I'm scrappy on the internet. I really am.
You are.
I'm not always proud of it. You know, I do tone it down. My main thing is there are people who I would want to work with, and the etiquette is often a shorthand for I will treat you well.
Yeah.
I will behave professionally in private. I will do that. And I wonder how I demonstrate that as somebody who will tell people to fuck off. Because it's like, well, you, or who will call out bad things, because sometimes I need to settle things privately. Sometimes there are things where it's like, this is my career, this is your career. If we've got a dispute, this only hurts us.
Totally. I mean, and that does get complicated, and it's sort of where like when if theoretically I'm talking to, you know, a book editor on your behalf, you know, I'm going to be able to tell them, you know, that you are a person of that sort of character, you know, and that's one of the reasons why it's helpful, you know, to have, you know, representation in that way, you know, but like, I mean, I guess I would say
references, maybe like job references. Like I can get,
I mean,
5
like,
or 6 people to say that I'm like that I'm good to work with.
This is what I would say with it. This is what I would say about it is, and this is a good test, I think, for any writer who's thinking about their internet presence, because this happens. Like I can't tell you that this kind of thing doesn't happen. I'm pitching a writer. They, you know, if I'm pitching a book proposal or if even in the letter, their Twitter handle is probably in there, which means that book editors are going to read the proposal and say, oh, I wonder what this author talks about on the internet. And if they go to your page and proportionally your page is entirely fights and not value neutral, like forget about like whether these are righteous fights or whether these are, you know, where you're in the right or like arguing something that really matters, all this kind of stuff. Like if they go and your whole page is just like internecine disputes as opposed to anything that might vaguely relate to, you know, you know what I mean? Like that probably is going to get logged a little bit. And that isn't a value judgment on, that's just how are you using this tool? You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with behavior. It's more to do with content, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah, do people come to this fight page to buy a book?
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Like, and I do think that is a perfectly valid judgment for a publisher to make, where they can say, I don't know. I don't blame this person for having fights. I don't think they're in the wrong or that they are a bad person or that they are a toxic figure or any of those things. But it's not necessarily plausible in looking at this social media page that this is an avenue that this client might be promoting their work. You know what I mean? Like it's like there is a balance to strike. Like I mean, so it's all in proportion, right? Like I think like some people should think about like how much of what you're doing is interesting conversations and ideas that you're putting forth, which is something you do I think a really great job of. Like it's like you said, you get feisty on the internet, but like you also share a lot of interesting stuff, and it's a lot of like every time I click over, you've got some discussion going about something I've never thought about. You know what I mean? Like, and that's great, and that's what that sort of balance I think is really key, and it's true of any like writer you want to hear from, like even the ones who get in fights, and a lot of really great, interesting writers spend a lot of time on Twitter arguing with each other. But like at the end of the day, you look at their page and it's not 100% quote tweets of randos. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like mixed in there. There is interesting discussion or things they've been thinking about or reading or whatever, and it's like we can think about bringing all of these things into proportion. You know what I mean? And that isn't I don't think that's like a behavior judgment as much as it is like be strategic. You know what I mean? Like when you're putting and like they're not going to, a lot of this also depends on like when, like when you're not on, the truth is like if you're not on submission, an editor is not, like I typically, what I would say to, writers who I, pitch when it's like time to actually like, okay, I'm going to go talk to book editors about your work. I just tell them, I'm like, look, I'm not telling you how to act. I'm not going to give you anything like that. But just so you know, your handle is in the book proposal. So if an editor reads the book proposal and sees, oh, they've got a Twitter following, there's a plausible chance they're going to click over and see it. You know what I mean? Like that's just the reality of the situation. Like it would be wrong of me to, like, I'm not doing my job if I don't, like, if my job is to put people in their best position to get a book deal, like, there has to be a little bit of that, you know what I mean? But I don't know.
Thank you so much for joining me. I think this is interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, you should all go follow Erik on Twitter. He's at Erik Hane, and you should all check out his podcast at Print Run.
That's podcast. Right. Print Run Podcast. We talk about book stuff and labor stuff. I think you'll enjoy it. If you like this kind of conversation as it relates to the publishing industry, I have a strong suspicion you will like our show.
Yeah, it's better. Go out, go listen. Thank you. And I will stop recording.